So we should have the recording running. If at any stage you have questions and you don't want them to pop up on the recording, I can always pause that. So just give me a shout out. But like I said, this week is going to be quite quick. It's a week 14 and we're actually, I don't know why it says digestive system. It should say reproductive. This is one of those that I really should have caught it earlier on. I've even used these same slides this morning. But we're looking at the male reproductive system. And normally on most textbooks and most courses, we cover both the male and female reproductive systems in one chapter. So that's why this week is going to be so super light, especially since male reproductive system is so much more simple. There's not as much going on in terms of the hormones and menstrual cycle and whole gestation and these things. So this is going to be quite a nice and smooth. And like I said, I'm aiming for an hour max. So let's see how we get through. I do have a couple of announcements that what I wrote to the weekly announcements probably cover quite a lot of those, but I always try to also verbally communicate those. So let's look through all of those. So first of all, the practical tree, because there were just so many issues, and I think that we were running so far behind with it. I didn't want anyone to feel that, oh, now I have to be learning new stuff and I have to be thinking old stuff. So for that reason, what I did, and it should have been already done, I think it should show up on your grade report. Everyone got full marks for practical 3. And I'm now, or I have already rebuilt it, but I just wanted to wait until I've announced all of the extra credit assignments. I have rebuilt the practical 3, and that's going to be available as an extra credit that you can get in addition points. So that's going to be when I just release all of the extra credit activities. So not to worry about practical 3. That's also kind of nice. You know that you've got those points in the back. Exam 3, I'm just about finishing off the grades, just going through the last time that everything's consistent and so on. And as you might have seen, all of the coursework now should have a due date of December 13th. And I try to keep it that it's going to be December 13th. There is a slight chance that that might move, and I would make an announcement. I would let everyone know. Basically, I'm happy to keep them open as long as necessary, as long as I have enough time to finalize your scores before I have to give them to the registry. So that's the reason why I can't keep them to the very, very last moment. I need to have some time to finalize those scores. If you have an assignment that had limited number of attempts, it is possible that it won't still run for you, even though I have reopened it. So in that case, you might need to drop me a message. But I really do want you to feel that anything where you didn't do as well as you wanted, anything you missed, or anything if you just loved it, you can do any assignment. That also includes exams. That also includes practicals. So just let me know. Exams and practicals, I normally need to open manual. Do you have any questions about those? Those kind of make sense. Yeah. No questions. So this week, we're going to be doing quite a short chapter. So we have quite a short amount of, or quite a little of assignments. From the McGraw-Hill, from the publisher's platform, you are only going to be doing the Learn Smart quiz, and then you have the anatomy practical. In addition to that, we have forensic exercise or forensic application of looking identification of semen, and that's going to be completely on Canvas. So that's again one of those that you won't find on the Connect. So make sure you get it done on the Canvas. And it's going to be under there on the assignments as forensic examination of semen as our own activity. And I kind of tried to disalign it from the rest so it would stand out. So make sure you get those points as well. once you click there, it opens up a description of the exam or the assignment, and there's a link that opens up a document that you can download. So that document alone probably should give you a lot of answers, and then you can do independent research as well, that if you want to fulfill that. But basically what I'm asking you is to write a short kind of a paragraph, couple of sentences of 3 different methods how we can test semen samples. And those 3 methods are going to be black light, acid phosphate, and immunological tests. Really what I would do if I was a student, I would look first the grading matrix, that what's needed for the full marks. And then I would write the answer. All of these, what you're being asked to do, all of the topics, everything is listed a couple of times in the assignment itself on the Canvas, and also on this handout that opens up when you download it from the assignment entry page. So really keep it simple. Don't go crazy with extra research. I don't want you to have to do a literature review. It's just really, really simple answer that what these methods do. Look at the grading matrix. That really is the best way to go ahead. We're going to go through the reproductive system of male key points, but I just kind of want to show the other couple of things that I do want to mention. Once we come back from the Thanksgiving break, all of your grades are going to be up to date. So at that point, I'm going to ask you all to review your grades, look where you're standing, and then look at the what extra credit assignments you want to do. And I'm hoping that I have all of those open at that point as well. Instructions for all this will be posted on announcements, but I do think that watching these weekly videos, if nothing else, watching the first part, if you cannot attend, obviously you're attending, so I really, really appreciate that. But I've got some students who have not attended, and I doubt if they have watched the videos, so they might miss out on something on their assignments. I try to be very good in writing, but sometimes I miss that. And for the finals project, I'll also release it at that point. There's again another chance to earn a lot of extra credit points. And again, finals project is going to be less than a homework in a typical week. And then we have the normal tutoring that's available as well. But what I really want to do, I want to jump to the male reproductive system so we can have a quick look through that. What's the key points? What do we need to know about that? So I'm going to change the PowerPoint to another presentation. Let's close that, and I want to open this one. You should be able to see it coming on your screen now. And these are again not the slides that are the ones that are the lecture recordings, so they're not manipulated or done to the same same format as your college uses, but they give an idea. This is totally stupid story. Before I came to America, and that's all I knew about America based on what I had seen on Here Comes Honey Boo Boo. So I was a little surprised, and I did learn new terms also for anatomy that I had never seen. So it was very educational for me. So that's the topic where we're moving now. Before we jump to the male reproductive system, I think it's important that, and I've left the kind of highlights and writings that I've used in the morning session, so we're going to use those, but I think it's really important that we know a couple of basic terms that you'll keep running on. So the first term that I want you to be familiar with is going to be the term gonads. Gonads are our primary sex organs, and there's only one for each sex. So for males, it's going to be testis, And for females, it's going to be ovaries. So those are the only primary sex organs that we have. All of the other structures that we'll be looking at are going to be accessory reproductive organs. So they're all just helping this reproductive process. They're not the main reproductive organ. There's only one. And as we know, or if you don't know, now you will, there's two purposes on gonads, what they are going to be doing. So regardless of the sex, one of the functions that I think that students normally know really well is the production of the gametes. So production of the sex cells. So for males, this is of course going to be sperm, and for females, egg cells. And you might sometimes see sperm also being called spermatozoa. And you can see the egg cell sometimes being called ova or oocyte. So those are alternative terms that you might sometimes see. Don't let that throw you off. But I want you to know that the sex cells are known as gametes. The other function that often goes missed, but which is nonetheless, it's still quite an important one, is going to be the production of the sex hormones. So I do want you to know that as well, that gonads produce not only the sex cells, but also sex hormones. For males, that's going to be androgens, especially testosterone. For females, estrogen and progesterone. So all of those are going to be important. But since we're focusing on males on this chapter, this is going to be really quick in terms of hormones. Males are simple, not just on a mental level, but also in terms of our anatomy. I can promise that. So what we're going to do on this chapter, we're going to go through everything that we see here. And while we're going through it, it's some of it is anatomy, and some of it is going to be tying the anatomy to the physiology. But it's really, really straightforward. We're going to follow the path of the sperm as it travels through the system and what gets added to produce the semen. And that's really, other than a little bit section that I want to say about hormonal control, all there is to it on this week's session. However, rather than showing you a diagram, some students learn better by taking notes. Some students learn better by doing drawings, doing diagrams. Some students learn best just by listening. So it's up to you what you choose and what works for you. But if you are a person who learns by doing notes, I'm actually going to be drawing with you on the screen everything you need to know about male reproductive system. And that's all you need to know. It's going to be much more simpler than this diagram that we're seeing here. And this is, I think, the morning's drawing, what we ended up with. So we'll take it in pieces and we'll go through it. So don't worry about it. But we're going to discuss the male reproductive tract through together by drawing it bit by bit. So we're going to start with the simple initial observation that the primary sex organ for males was, of course, the testes. And as you could see, I'm going to be using quite a bit of color coordination when we're making this graph. So if you have colors and you prefer to use them, I really encourage you to use those. But again, you don't have to do drawing if that's not your way of learning. But we remember that testes had two important functions. The first function was production of sperm. That was supposed to be a letter. And the second function was production of sex hormone. So we're going to just color these in because I find that it's going to be the easiest way. And I do sometimes have students who are colorblind, it does help me to know that. So I always encourage to let me know, not that I want to prey on your personal life, but then I know to use certain colors. Usually there's rarely anyone who can't see any color at all. So we can choose just the colors that work for you. So we learned that the primary sex organ was the testes for males, and production of sperm and production of the sex hormone was the main function of that. So we really want to highlight this structure because everything else that we're going to add to this is just accessory organs. They're just organs that assist with everything else that we're doing. So let's go through those. And the first structure that I'm going to add to this is going to be structure called epididymis. And it sounds crazy, but that's what it's called. That's simply a coiled tube. It's a bunch of very, very thin tube that lays on top of the testes. It doesn't cover all of the testes, but it covers on the side that's facing more towards the body itself, more posterior side of the testes. It covers a significant part of that. And the function of epididymis is that it's where the sperm goes to mature. And sperm also gets stored there. So one of my students explained it to me in this way, that even the sperm has to go to the school. I don't know if that's your way of remembering it. Great. I don't know if that's the description of it that I would have used, but anything that helps you. So the sperm that's produced by the testes is not ready, it's not fully functional by the time it leaves the testes. It has to take time to mature. So the maturation process happens on this epididymis, which is just very, very thin tube kind of coiled together, forming this structure on top of the testes. Well, once the sperm has matured, that it is capable of doing the job that we have assigned for it, and it is also needed. At that time, sperm is released into this long muscular tube. And this tube is going to be a really important structure. And what you know about anatomy and physiology is that once it's something important, we give it many names. I know it's really frustrating, but that's unfortunately how it's been. So I think that I was trained in Europe that it's vas deferens. I think your textbook uses ductus deferens. And some even call it ductus deferentia. So you can see any of those versions being used. And if my writing doesn't make sense, just let me know. I do have a little bit of bad writing when I do it on the computer. And this tube is nothing but a muscular tube. And like I said, it was about 45 centimeters in length. So if my math doesn't completely fail me, I think that's about 18 inches. So that's way longer than at least I would assume for its length. And the reason why it's so long is that it actually has to travel over the urinary bladder. So that adds a little bit of extra length to it. So really it kind of arches over the urinary bladder and then behind it. I'm just going to have to move the screen. I've got little windows open here and there so that I'm able to see. So it goes over the urinary bladder and then down. And really the only function that this tube has is the transportation of sperm cell. That's it once it's needed and once it's released. And being muscular, that also helps the journey of the sperm up this tube. So we remember those peristalsis movements. So all of these would assist in addition to the sperm swimming it by itself, but also for the sperm to make its journey up here. I think that by the time we reach the end of the vas deferens, or ductus deferens, or ductus deferentia, we're about at the halfway of the distance that the sperm has to travel within the male reproductive tract. Also, as a side note, and I don't think I mentioned this in the morning session, but if we were to do a vasectomy for a male, this is the tube we would cut. So that's how vasectomy works. And it is something that we can reverse. For female, it's harder to reverse if we alter the female reproductive tract. But for male, it is possible. It's not that complex operation. At the end of the vas deferens, or ductus deferens, ductus deferentia, there's simply an enlargement of this same tube. So it forms a little bit of like a blob at the end of it, but it's nothing else but the same tube again. And this part is known as ampulla. And you might see the term ampulla being used in some other contexts as well, and that relates to the fact that it really is just an enlargement of the structure. And I didn't mean to draw over that word. I was meaning to use a highlighter, but of course I didn't click the right button. So don't think that I was trying to erase it. So we're looking at ampulla, and ampulla was this structure here. You can use any colors that you wish. I'm just kind of picking whatever I have on the Microsoft Word or Microsoft PowerPoint available. So ampulla had no other function than just to be the extension, kind of a larger enlargement of the vas deferens. Now we get actually to the part where they're starting to happen more in the male reproductive tract. So at this point, we have a duct that continues here after the ampulla, but you can see that it divides into two. So it has a branch, and we'll be looking at what comes to that branch in a second. In addition, that same duct opens up to the urinary bladder, so our urethra comes down from the urinary bladder. Since we are not looking of the urinary system, we're not going to be spending a lot of time considering how the urinary bladder fits into all of this. But this part of the duct is called ejaculatory duct. So in ejaculatory duct, that's the part where only the sperm travels. There's no urine in this part. So this part is dedicated only to the I didn't mean to do that. Only to the purposes of the reproductive tract. So there's no urine in this part yet. We will add the urine later on to that branch, after that branch that we're seeing next, and then the name of this duct will change. But before we, before we add the urine into this duct, let's have a look what was at the end of this second branch that we saw. And that's going to be our first gland that we'll see. And the very first gland is going to be, like I said, located here. This all isn't to scale. I think that testes would be way bigger in comparison to what I'm drawing, but it just helps to highlight the glands that they're not tiny. And this gland is going to be our seminal vesicle. So I'll add it. I'm looking, where shall I add it? I'll add it here. And seminal vesicle releases secretions that are alkaline. There's a lot of fructose. There's also prostaglandins. So really their function is to nourish the sperm. And if you think about it, at this stage, sperm has traveled already quite a long distance. So sperm has probably burnt off all of the energy that it had stored within the sperm cell. So by this stage, the seminal vesicle works in a rather clever way of giving more energy so that the sperm can continue its swimming action further down the tract. So it's about at the halfway point of the duct system. So that kind of makes sense. Why do we have this gland? Not just that it is there, but why is it there? The next structure that I'm going to draw is going to be located. It's a larger gland. It's about a walnut-sized gland, and it surrounds all of these ducts that we have seen so far, and also the urethra that's coming out of the first part of the urethra from the urinary bladder. Of course, the urethra continues a little bit further, and we'll have a look of the later parts of the urethra in a bit, but this gland through which all of these ducts have to go through is of course going to be our prostate gland. And what prostate does, it does release some secretions, that's true, but in addition, why prostate is going to be very important for us to consider is that prostate cancers are not that uncommon. Older you get, as a male, higher risk of developing a prostate gland cancer you have. Age is the single one main factor predictor of developing a prostate cancer. The good news, I guess, is that about 90% of all prostate cancers are caught at the point when it hasn't yet spread anywhere outside the prostate. And we can actually treat the prostate cancers with great success. One way to treat that is to remove the entire prostate. And in other ways that we can do, we just remove a part of it, kind of cut a pizza-shaped slice through it. But some of the first signs and symptoms of prostate overgrowth is the fact that urination becomes very difficult. Also, the sexual intercourse, for example, production of the semen becomes difficult or painful. And that kind of makes sense if you think that all of these tubes have to go through the prostate. So if prostate grows, it squeezes these tubes closed. So that's the big gland that we noticed there. And at this point, we're ready to draw the remaining of the duct system that we have to look at. So I'm going to draw it, even though we're going to go through it in a little bit later. We're not going to cover it immediately after, but I'm going to draw rest of it. So this is, of course, going to be our urethra. And this was the tube that's shared both by the reproductive system, but also the urinary system. And of course, on females, we have completely separated reproductive and urinary system, but on males, these are shared. And this does bring certain differences in the female and male, not just anatomy, but also physiology, in a sense that male, for example, need to usually urinate after the intercourse because this tube is kind of cleaned by doing this act of urination. So that's our urethra. And you'll be glad to know that we only have one more gland to add to this. So we're almost at the finish line. If at any point I'm going too fast or too slow, or what I'm writing doesn't make sense, or what I'm saying doesn't make sense, just let me know. I really won't be offended. I realize that I sometimes do speak a little bit unclearly since I'm not a native speaker. So the last gland that we're going to have here is going to be called bulbourethral gland, or sometimes it's called also Kopler's gland after the person who identified it. So let's write it here. It's supposed to be R. I'm just abbreviating the gland. The other term, like I said, was the Kopler's gland. And this gland releases secretions in response to the sexual stimulation. Well, that end of it doesn't really show up really well. And let's color that as well so that it stands out. The important thing here to notice is that at this point, we're actually talking about semen, not just of a sperm, because now we have mixed with the sperm all of these other secretions. So bulbourethral gland or Kopler's gland. And rest of it is just the urethra that continues to the external body. There's one more structure that I want to add, or actually it's two structures, but we're just going to label it as one structure. And that's a group of tissue that receives a lot of blood supply during the time when man is aroused and erection results, as the blood supply makes the structure firm up. So that's around the penis. On both sides, there's actually, if we were to be exact and take a cross section, there's 3 of these, 2 of one, 1 of one. And these are known as corpus cavernosum and corpus spongiosum. So I'm adding them here. And I think that's a spongiosum. So that's CORPUSCAVERNOSUM or SPONGIOSUM. And I think that the spongiosum really describes it well. It's kind of like this sponge-like structure that when it gets filled with the blood, then firms up. And I'm just looking at what color I wouldn't have used yet. Let's do it with the red. It's not that it's a bad structure, but I just can't think of any other color that I wouldn't have used. So I'm not expecting you to tell apart which one is corpus cavernosum and which one is corpus spongiosum. All I'm expecting is that you know that there are structures like that. And however you wish to memorize those. Those are the only structures. Again, remember that it's an open book exams that we do, and there's no final exam. The final is going to be a project. So really, what I want is just that you have the notes that you need. I know that it got really quickly, really messy, and really busy. I do have nicer drawing that I will upload on the canvas, but I do really find that students learn better once they've drawn it once for themselves. So those are only parts that you need to know about male reproductive tract. And I'm just looking out of curiosity, where are we standing with the time? We should be done in an hour easily. So there's just a couple of minor details that I will add to this story, but by large, that was the big thing to know. So just if we do kind of a quick recap, we remember the primary sex organ for males is gonna be the testes. That's where the sperm cells are produced. Sperm cells go to the epididymis where they mature until they're ready to do their function. They become functional and they also get stored until they're needed. Once they are needed, they get released to the vas deferens or ductus deferens or ductus deferentia, which of course could be also cut if we do vasectomy for a man. And the vas deferens goes over the urinary bladder and at the back expands into a larger cavity or ampulla, as we call it. The part from the ampulla that's not yet shared, this part of the duct that's not yet shared with the urinary bladder, is going to be called ejaculatory duct. To the ejaculatory duct, we're getting our first secretion from the first gland that we're having a look, and that was seminal vesicle. That was rich in fructose, that secretion, so that nourished the sperm. Once it got to this point, it needed more energy to travel further. Once we add urinary bladder secretions, this duct now turns into urethra. So all the rest of this duct system is going to be urethra. And both urethra and our ejaculatory duct have to go through prostate gland. So if there's extra growth of the prostate gland, that will squeeze these ducts closed, and that will be the first signs and symptoms that we often see. Age in males is the main risk factor for the prostate cancer. However, very, very successful surgeries, great prognosis. The last gland that we're going to look at was going to be our bulbourethral gland or Kopper's gland, that we sometimes call it as well. And that released the secretions in response to the sexual stimulation. Now, sperm plus all these secretions mixed makes it semen, and semen travels out through the penis, and on the penis we had corpus cavernosum and corpus spongiosum, which helped to firm up the penis so that we're able to have intercourse. And if you think of the main function of the intercourse, it's to deliver sperm as far into female reproductive tract as we can. So we're trying to help this journey for the sperm to travel. So I hope that this summary made sense. I know that it's a lot, but at the same time, it really isn't, because this is all there is to it. So I have in the lecture video, I actually do discuss these one by one, but I do really think that you drawing it helps. These are, like I said, notes from another class that I used to teach, and not really something that you have to know. It's my dissertation. It was not accepted to the university library, surprisingly, because of its title. I had to change it. But I did study embryos, hormonal control, how embryos grow to the right size and shape as they are needed. But nothing that you have to know, just showing that there are all sorts of questions that we think. One important thing that I do want to mention that we have not yet highlighted, that the testes were located within a structure called scrotum. So the reason why testes are located in this bag-like or sac-like structure is that we want to have just slightly cooler temperature for the sperm production or sperm maturation than what it is in body's core temperature. Of course, if it gets cold, then scrotum can climb up, and the muscle for this is going to be dartos muscle that pulls the scrotum up. I did want to mention at this point one important thing that I kind of feel we should have addressed earlier, but I don't know where it would have been a right time to address it. So we're addressing it now. There's a huge difference in biology, and I'm not trying to change your mind when you talk about other fields, but in biology, between sex and gender. In biology, we look at that the sex is what's coded in your DNA. You are, with very, very rare exceptions, one sex or another sex. We can do all sorts of surgeries, we can reassign your characteristics, but your sex is still what it is. So just know the difference between that. Gender is more to do with what you identify as. There's a bunch of diagrams that are provided in your full lecture video. There's also, I did do always reading about things. I think that some doctors I think it was a Dutch team, identified a formula for a perfect sperm. If you're into that sort of stuff, that's the formula. You don't have to know it, but they had calculated what would make the movement of the sperm the most ideal. There is a little bit of, you don't think that math and biology would mix. There's a little bit of logic. If we're able to follow a single sperm on a microscope and follow its movement, we can fill in this formula and then we can tell, is it a healthy, is it successful, or is it not? So infertility issues are a big issue that gets often looked at. Couple of more diagrams, but we really already covered all of this in our drawing. I do want to mention that the term spermatogenesis refers to the production of the sperm. So the term genesis was always when something was created. So spermatogenesis is going to be what we'll have a look as well in the full lecture video. I do not expect you to know all, or I'm not going to repeat all of this mitosis, meiosis consideration. You should have covered that in your intro bio, so we're not going to spend time on that. We just know that half of the chromosomes are contributed by male and half of the chromosomes by a female, and those joining the sperm and the egg together, they result in full chromosome matter for the child that's produced. I do want to, from this diagram, just look at the very last step, the step 7. We should know the different parts of the sperm cell. So we do know that we have the head part, and within the head part, we've got the nucleus. So the DNA is located there. That's going to be contributed to the offspring. In addition, there's going to be a bunch of enzymes that help the sperm to penetrate into the egg cell. So they get released, and we'll have a look of that process in the next chapter. In addition, on the sperm, we have something called midpiece. It's kind of a little bit thicker part than the tail itself. And in the midpiece, we're going to have a lot of mitochondria. So if you think what was the function of the mitochondria, that was, of course, for the longest of time, we described them as the powerhouse of the cell. Now we have found out that there is energy being produced in other parts of the cell, but still most of the energy within the mitochondria. And if you think about the midpiece, the function of the mitochondria is really to provide the energy for the tail, then to do its job, help the sperm to swim onwards so that it can get to its destination. What else did I want to mention? I wanted to mention that sperm can actually live in the female body up to 3 days. So there's plenty of time for the sperm to do its journey and find to its destination, to the egg cell. So that's something to bear in mind. And the very last part that we're going to cover is going to be the hormonal regulation of the reproductive system. And after this, we're done. So there's 2 of our previous familiar structures, hypothalamus that we see, that contributes to the male reproductive regulation, and the hypothalamus release something called gonadotropin releasing hormone. So this is the first time when I actually think that everything that we learned in our first chapter about hormones starts to make sense. So hypothalamus controls the male reproductive system through this gonadotropin releasing hormone. Another hormone a set of two other hormones that are released by the pituitary gland. And these hormones are not that important in male reproductive system, but we'll see them on the female reproductive system as well, where they are the hormones that drive the menstrual cycle. So these are going to be follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. However, I do want you to remember that we, of course, have also the gonads, which were, of course, the testes. They also release hormones to regulate the male reproductive tract. And those are only structures that you need to know about the regulation of the male reproductive system. One last thing that I do want to mention, that again we see our homeostasis mechanism. So male reproductive tract hormonal regulation is through negative feedback. So we want to keep the amount of hormones as ideal. We don't want to have too much and we don't want to have too little. And that's just to show the structures. And this is the very last slide, I promise. So here we're looking at the amount of testosterone during the life cycle of an individual. And what we see that before the birth, there is a huge surge of the testosterone. That's quite a high peak for an embryo. And what happens before the birth, during the embryonic development, somewhere between 3 and 6 months, is that we actually start during our embryonic development as having both female and male reproductive systems, basic structures present. And then this hormone spike causes that only one of these systems is maintained and the other one degenerates. So that's the vital time when the presence of the sex hormones defines the sex that the individual will end up with. Immediately after birth, there's a small spike of the sex hormones, testosterone, but especially at the puberty, you see that the amount of testosterone spikes for the male. And this spike is so significant that sometimes we see on teenagers these kind of mood swings as well, because we're getting used to all of the sudden having all these hormones. We will see the same, and especially on females, we have for a long time already discussed about the decrease of the sex hormones after menopause. But now we're finding out that on males after 60, the testosterone levels also drop. And that can have not just physical changes, but mood effects. So the hormone replacement therapies are becoming more common also for men. But that's really all that we have for this chapter. And I'm just gonna close this PowerPoint and we're gonna jump to the review. But I think that we already completed the review to a large part. So it's just gonna be a reminder of what we discussed. Let's get that up. Share. And we should be able to see the PowerPoint like we already saw and discussed at the very start. Do remember that there's going to be a chance for the extra credit with the practical treat that I'm going to have to release, but it's going to be extra credit. You already got full marks for that. In addition, all of your scores will be updated by the time we come back from the break, and you'll know exactly where you're standing. You can retake any assignments, any coursework, any exams, any practicals, just let me know if it doesn't let you in, but all of those should be now open. And also when you take it, make sure that your grades get updated at the Canvas as well. If for some reason something doesn't let you retake it, it's probably because there's been limited attempts. So if there's been limited attempts, just message me. I'll be checking the messages throughout the Thanksgiving break as well. And this is not that you have to do it during Thanksgiving break. These are going to be open all the way till the end of the course. So I also do want you to get a break. And we already discussed that the only odd thing about this week's assignments was the lab. That's fully on Canvas. So make sure that you just get it done. Don't get overly carried away. Really look at the grading matrix. I don't want you to feel that you have to write an essay. It's just a couple of sentences of each one. And like I said, don't be stressed. I want you to be relieved and feel happy when you're going for your break. Really, it is extra credit is going to be available. You can retake assignments, you can retake homework, you can retake exams, you can retake practicals. So there's plenty of chances to get your grade where you want it to be. Just at this time, all I want you to do is have a good break and really give yourself a pat to the back. You're almost done. And also remember that you need to rest so you can perform ideally for the last couple of weeks. I don't think that there's anything else that I have to say. And I'm saying this both to the video and also to you. I don't know which people, some people celebrate Thanksgiving, some people don't. Regardless whether you celebrate it or not, I hope you have a really good break. And I hope you get to rest. Give yourself at least one day when you get to enjoy of the break. You deserve it, because what you'll find that you'll work so much better once you're rested. And I also hope that you get to connect with your loved ones. It may not be in person, it might be virtually, but this is a good time to tell them that you remember them, even though you've been busy throughout the semester and you're almost done with the semester, and then you'll have a good break. But that's all I had. I'm going to stop the recording now. And if you have any questions, we can cover them.